Back it up.
Hey! You put your hands on me again and we're gonna have a very different conversation.
Turn the car around, sir.
I live here. Unit 23. You can call the office.
Not on my
Imagine
list, 'cause you
standing
bothered-
at the gates of your own home, the villa you built from nothing, only to be blocked, threatened, and humiliated by the very people you hired to protect it. Marcus Hayes, a 42-year-old CEO worth millions, pulled up to his private estate on what should have been a peaceful Sunday afternoon. But within minutes, he was surrounded by security guards with hands on their weapons, treating him like a criminal. Why? Because they didn't believe a black man could own a property like this. What happened next would shock the entire community and send shockwaves through the media. But before we dive in, ask yourself this: how would you react if the people sworn to protect you refused to see your humanity? Marcus Hayes had spent 20 years building his empire from the ground up. Born in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, he'd watched his single mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Those memories never left him. Even now, driving his black Mercedes through the palm-lined streets of Coral Vista, one of the most exclusive gated communities in South Florida. He'd earned his place here. Every inch of the marble floors, every crystal chandelier, every piece of art hanging in his 6-bedroom villa represented sacrifice, sleepless nights, and relentless determination. This Sunday afternoon was supposed to be simple. Marcus had spent the morning at his downtown office tying up loose ends on a major acquisition deal that would expand his tech consulting firm into 3 new states. He'd skipped lunch, his mind focused on strategy and growth. All he wanted now was to get home, change into something comfortable, and spend the rest of the day by the pool with a book he'd been trying to finish for weeks. As he approached the main entrance to Coral Vista, he noticed something different. There were 2 new security guards at the gatehouse, faces he didn't recognize. The usual team knew him well. He'd chatted with them dozens of times, learned their names, asked about their families. But turnover happened. He didn't think much of it as he slowed his car and lowered the window. The first guard, a stocky white man in his 30s with a crew cut and a rigid posture, stepped forward. His hand rested on his belt, close to his sidearm. His partner, a taller man with sunglasses, despite the overcast sky, stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed. "Can I help you?" the first guard asked, his tone flat and unwelcoming. Marcus smiled, accustomed to putting people at ease. "Afternoon. I'm just heading home, 1247 Ocean Crest Drive." The guard's expression didn't change. "Name?" "Marcus Hayes." There was a pause. The guard exchanged a glance with his partner, something unspoken passing between them. Then he turned back to Marcus. "You're the owner?" "Yes, I am." Another pause, longer this time. The second guard moved closer, leaning down to peer into the car window. His eyes scanned the interior, the leather seats, the briefcase on the passenger side, the gym bag in the back. "Can I see some ID?" the first guard said. Marcus felt a flicker of annoyance, but kept his composure. "Sure." He reached for his wallet, pulled out his driver's license, and handed it over. The address was right there, 1247 Ocean Crest Drive, Coral Vista. The guard studied it for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked at Marcus, then back at the license, as if trying to reconcile the two. "This says you live here," the guard said slowly. "Because I do." "You're the owner? Not the driver? Or a guest?" And there it was, the subtle shift in the air, the implication hanging between them like a storm cloud. Marcus had felt this countless times before, in boardrooms where people assumed he was the assistant, not the executive, in stores where staff followed him a little too closely, in restaurants where hosts questioned his reservation. He'd learned to navigate these moments with calm and professionalism, but that didn't make them sting any less. "I'm the owner," Marcus said firmly, his jaw tightening. The guard handed the license back, but didn't move to open the gate. Instead, he pulled out a radio. "Yeah, we've got someone here claiming to be the owner of 1247. Can you verify?" Marcus's heart rate picked up. Claiming to be the owner? He'd lived here for 3 years. His name was on every piece of documentation. He paid the exorbitant HOA fees every quarter without complaint. Behind him, another car pulled up, a white couple in a Range Rover. The second guard immediately waved them through with a smile and a friendly nod. No ID check, no verification. They rolled past Marcus's car without even slowing down. Something was very, very wrong.
"Sir, I'm going to need you to pull over to the side," the first guard said, pointing to a small area near the gatehouse. Marcus felt his frustration building. "Why? I've shown you my ID. My address is right there." "We're waiting for confirmation from the homeowner." "I am the homeowner." The guard's expression hardened. "Sir, I need you to pull over. Now." Marcus considered his options. He could argue, escalate the situation, demand to speak to a supervisor, but he'd been in enough of these encounters to know how quickly they could spiral. So he did as he was told, pulling his car to the side and putting it in park. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the anger rising in his chest. Minutes passed. 5. Then 10. Marcus watched as 3 more cars, all driven by white residents, were waved through without question. One driver didn't even roll down his window. The guards just smiled and opened the gate. Finally, the first guard walked over. "Sir, can you step out of the vehicle?" "Excuse me?" "Step out of the vehicle, please." "Why? What's the problem?" "We're still waiting for confirmation from the homeowner." "I am the homeowner." The guard's expression hardened. "Sir, I need you to pull over, now." Marcus considered his options. He could argue, escalate the situation, demand to speak to a supervisor, but he'd been in enough of these encounters to know how quickly they could spiral. So he did as he was told, pulling his car to the side and putting it in park. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the anger rising in his chest. Minutes passed. 5. Then 10. Marcus watched as 3 more cars, all driven by white residents, were waved through without question. One driver didn't even roll down his window. The guards just smiled and opened the gate. Finally, the first guard walked over. "Sir, can you step out of the vehicle?" "Excuse me?" "Step out of the vehicle, please." "Why? What's the problem?" "We're still waiting for confirmation. In the meantime, I need to verify that you have authorization to be here." Marcus's blood boiled. Authorization to enter his own home? But he complied, opening the door and stepping out slowly, deliberately. He was wearing a tailored navy suit, a white dress shirt, Italian leather shoes. He looked every bit the successful businessman he was. Yet the guards looked at him like he was a threat. "Hands where I can see them," the second guard said, stepping closer. "Are you serious right now?" Marcus's voice rose despite himself. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus lifted his hands slightly, palms out, his heart pounding. This was insane, absolutely insane. He'd been pulled over by cops before, profiled in stores, but never, never had he been treated like a criminal at the gates of his own home. A small crowd began to gather. Other residents, some on foot, others slowing their cars to watch. Marcus recognized a few faces, neighbors he'd waved to, exchanged pleasantries with at community events. But none of them intervened. They just watched, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled suspicion. "Check his ID again," the second guard muttered to his partner. "I already did." "Check it again and run his plates." "I can't believe what I'm hearing. Run my plates? For what? I live here. Call the property management office. Call the HOA. Call anyone who can confirm that I own that house." "Sir, calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. You're treating me like I'm trespassing on my own property." One of the onlookers, an older white woman with a small dog, leaned over to her companion. "Do you know him?" she whispered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "No, never seen him before." Marcus turned to them. "I live at 1247 Ocean Crest. I've lived here for 3 years." The woman looked skeptical. "Really? I've never seen you." That doesn't mean I don't live here. The first guard stepped between them. Sir, I need you to stay calm or I'll have to call the police. Call them, Marcus shot back. Please, call them, because this is harassment. The guard pulled out his phone and Marcus's stomach dropped. He knew how this could go. He'd seen the news stories. Black men shot for reaching for their wallets, for standing on their own porches, for existing in spaces where people didn't think they belonged. And now here he was, in broad daylight, surrounded by people who saw him as a threat rather than a neighbor. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the guard's phone speaker. Yeah, we've got a suspicious individual at the Coral Vista main gate, refusing to comply with security protocols. Suspicious individual? Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief. I showed you my ID. I told you where I live. Sir, step back. I'm not stepping anywhere. This is ridiculous. The second guard moved closer, his hand now hovering near his weapon. Sir, if you don't comply, we will use force. Time seemed to slow. Marcus felt the weight of every eye on him, felt the humiliation burning through his chest. He thought about his mother, about everything she sacrificed so he could have opportunities she never had. And he thought about the years he'd spent proving himself in boardrooms full of people who doubted him. And now here he was, being threatened with violence at the gates of his own home. You know what? Marcus said quietly, his voice trembling with restrained fury. Do what you have to do. But when this is over, when you realize who I am and what you've done, you're going to regret this. The first guard smirked. Is that a threat? No, it's a promise. A police car pulled up moments later, lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out and Marcus felt his body tense. He'd been cooperative. He'd shown his ID. He'd done everything right. But he also knew that in situations like this, doing everything right wasn't always enough. What's the situation? One of the officers asked the guards. We've got someone claiming to own a property here, but we can't verify it. He's been uncooperative and hostile. Hostile? Marcus couldn't hold back anymore. I've been standing here for 20 minutes while you treat me like a criminal. I live here. I own my home. The officer turned to Marcus. Sir, do you have identification? I already showed them my license. It has my address on it, 1247 Ocean Crest. Can I see it? Marcus handed it over, his hands shaking with anger. The officer examined it, then looked up at the gatehouse. Can someone call the homeowner and verify? We've been trying, the first guard said. No answer. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'll call myself. I'll show you my mortgage statements, my utility bills, my tax records, whatever you need. But before he could pull up any documents, one of the onlookers, a man in his 50s wearing golf attire, spoke up. Actually, I think I know who lives there. Wasn't it the Richardsons? The Richardsons moved out 2 years ago. I bought the house from them. The man shrugged. I don't remember seeing you at any HOA meetings. I've been to 3 meetings this year alone.
The crowd had grown. At least a dozen residents now stood watching, some recording on their phones. Marcus felt exposed, humiliated, stripped of his dignity in front of people who were supposed to be his community. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Every skeptical glance another knife in his back. One of the officers walked toward the gatehouse to make a call. Marcus stood there, flanked by the security guards, acutely aware of how this must look. A black man being detained while white residents passed freely through the gates. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. This was what he'd worked his entire life to escape, yet here it was, following him even into spaces he'd earned the right to occupy. Officer, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I'm the CEO of Hayes Global Consulting. My company manages the IT infrastructure for half the corporations in this state. I have clearances, credentials, business partnerships with some of the most prominent firms in the country. I'm not a criminal. I'm a homeowner who just wants to go home." The officer didn't respond, still on the phone. The second guard leaned in to his partner. "Maybe we should search the car." "Search my car?" Marcus stepped forward. "On what grounds? What probable cause do you have?" "Suspicious behavior." "What's suspicious about showing you my ID and asking to enter my own property?" "The attitude, the aggression." Marcus laughed bitterly. "The attitude? You stopped me without cause, questioned my ownership, made me wait while others drove through, treated me like a threat, and now you're calling me aggressive because I'm standing up for myself?" The officer finally returned. "Okay, I just spoke with the property management office. They confirmed that Marcus Hayes is listed as the owner of 1247 Ocean Crest Drive." Silence. The guards exchanged glances. The onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Marcus felt vindication and fury collide in his chest. "So we're done here?" Marcus asked coldly. "Yeah," the officer said. "You're free to go." Free to go. Marcus repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. "Free to go into my own home." The first guard cleared his throat. "Sir, we were just doing our job. Security protocols." "Don't," Marcus cut him off, his voice like ice. "Don't insult my intelligence by calling this protocol. You saw a black man and an expensive car and assumed I didn't belong. You made me prove my humanity, while everyone who looks like you got a free pass. You humiliated me, threatened me, and called the police on me, all because you couldn't imagine that someone like me could own a property like that." The crowd had gone silent. Even the guards looked uncomfortable now, the reality of what they'd done starting to sink in. Marcus pulled out his phone. "You want to know who I am? Fine, let me enlighten you." He opened his contacts and made a call, putting it on speaker. It rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Hayes Global Consulting, this is Jennifer." "Jennifer, it's Marcus. I need you to pull the contract we have with Coral Vista Property Management." "The HOA contract? Sure, one moment." The first guard's face went pale. "Sir, that's not necessary." "Oh, it's very necessary, because apparently I need to prove that not only do I own a home here, but that my company also provides the security systems, surveillance infrastructure, and IT management for this entire community. Which means, technically, you two work for me." Jennifer's voice came back through the speaker. "Found it. We have a 3-year contract with Coral Vista, renewed annually. Services include network security, camera systems, access control, and—" "That's enough, thank you, Jennifer." Marcus ended the call and looked directly at the guards. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to open that gate. I'm going to drive home, and tomorrow morning I'm going to have a very long conversation with your employer about what happened here today and whether Coral Vista needs to reconsider its security provider." The first guard opened his mouth to protest, but the officer interceded. "Let him through." The gate slowly opened. Marcus walked back to his car, every muscle in his body taut with barely contained rage. He could feel dozens of eyes on him as he got in, started the engine, and drove through those gates, the same gates that should have opened for him without question 30 minutes ago. As he drove up the palm-lined street toward his villa, his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He'd won this battle, but it felt hollow. Because this wasn't just about him. This was about every black person who'd been questioned, doubted, stopped, and forced to prove they belonged in spaces they'd earned.
Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a long moment before going inside.
The villa looked exactly as it had when he left that morning. Pristine, luxurious, a testament to everything he'd achieved. But now, it felt tainted. The sanctuary he'd built had been violated by prejudice, disguised as protocol. He thought about doing nothing, just letting it go, moving on. After all, he'd dealt with racism his entire life. This was just one more incident in a long series of indignities. But something inside him refused to stay silent this time. That evening, Marcus sat at his home office desk and began writing. Not an angry social media rant, not a heated email, but a formal, detailed account of what had happened, including timestamps, names, witness accounts, and a comprehensive analysis of the discriminatory pattern of behavior he'd observed at that gatehouse. He documented everything: the cars that were waved through, the questions he was asked that others weren't, the escalation to police involvement, the assumptions made about his legitimacy. By Monday morning, that document sat on the desks of the Coral Vista HOA board, the property management company, the security firm that employed those guards, and Marcus's legal team. He also forwarded it to several local news outlets with a simple message: "This is what everyday racism looks like in 2025. The response was swift. The security firm launched an immediate investigation. Both guards were suspended pending review. The property management company issued a public apology. The HOA called an emergency meeting to address security protocol failures. But Marcus knew apologies weren't enough. Real change required action. So, he did something unexpected. He proposed that Coral Vista implement mandatory bias training for all security personnel, establish clear protocols for resident verification that applied equally to everyone, and create an oversight committee that included diverse community members. He also used his position as a major contractor to leverage systemic changes, not just in Coral Vista, but in every gated community his company serviced across the state. 2 weeks later, the story made national news, not because of what happened to Marcus, but because of what he did about it. Major publications covered his methodical, strategic approach to combating institutional racism. He was invited to speak on panels about discrimination in residential communities. Other Black professionals reached out to share their own stories of being profiled in neighborhoods they called home. The 2 guards were eventually terminated, not because Marcus demanded it, but because the investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior toward delivery drivers, service workers, and guests of color. The gatehouse footage told a story that couldn't be denied. But the most profound change happened within the community itself. Residents who'd stood silently that day began speaking up. Some admitted they'd made assumptions. Others acknowledged they never considered how their Black neighbors might experience the same security measures differently. The uncomfortable conversations that followed were messy and painful, but they were necessary. Marcus eventually received a personal apology from the HOA president, a sincere one, face-to-face, with accountability. It didn't erase what happened, but it mattered. Months later, Marcus still lives in that villa. He still drives through those gates. But now when he approaches, he's greeted by security personnel who know his name, not because they were told to memorize it, but because they've been trained to see residents as people first, not profiles. The incident changed him. He'd always been aware of racism, had always navigated it with strategic precision. But experiencing such blatant discrimination in a space he'd worked decades to access crystallized something in him. He became more vocal, more willing to use his platform and resources to challenge systems that made assumptions based on skin color. Because that's the insidious nature of everyday racism. It doesn't always come with slurs or violence. Sometimes it comes dressed in security protocols and just doing my job. It comes in the extra questions asked, the extra verification required, the assumption that you don't belong until you prove otherwise. Marcus's story isn't just about one man being stopped at a gate. It's about the exhaustion of constantly having to prove your worth, your legitimacy, your humanity. It's about the presumption of suspicion that follows black bodies through spaces that should feel safe. And it's about the choice we all face when we witness injustice, to stay silent or to speak up.